Good evening, night wanderers, those who drift between sleep and speculation. Before we descend into tonight's story, a tale of secret orders, inherited power, and one young man's dangerous unraveling of a truth too large to hide, I want to ask you something simple. Where are you right now? What time glows on your clock? Are you curled beneath a blanket in the quiet of a sleeping house, or wide-eyed in the hush of a distant city? Leave a comment and let me know. I'm endlessly curious about the strange map we formed together. Voices connected across continents, all drawn to stories that whisper in the dark. And if what you hear tonight stirs something in you, if it lulls you or lingers with you, please consider subscribing to DrowsyTeller. Here, we tell the kind of stories that don't chase sleep away, but invite it closer. Tales that hum softly in the mind even as the eyes begin to close. Because sometimes the best bedtime stories are the ones that walk quietly along the edge of a deeper truth, casting long shadows and gentle dreams. Shall we begin? Tonight's story is titled Bloodline, the Boy Who Exposed the Light. Imagine a childhood wrapped in the luxury of immense wealth. Private jets, vast estates, and quiet family gatherings shielded from public view. Yet, behind this gilded surface lies something deeper and far more ominous. An ancient order, one that has shaped global events for centuries, manipulating economies, politics, and even technological progress from the shadows. Known in whispers and conspiracy circles as the Illuminati, this order isn't just legend for Elias Vance, the heir to the storied Vance dynasty. For him, it is blood-bound reality. From his earliest memories, Elias felt the strangeness woven into the silence around him. Cryptic symbols etched into stone, midnight oaths whispered under candlelight, and a father who insisted that some knowledge must remain unspoken. But when Elias came of age, the silence shattered. He uncovered the truth. The Vance family stood at the apex of a hidden power structure, pulling the strings behind wars, financial collapses, and carefully forged alliances with other elite bloodlines. His father, Victor Vance, was one of its architects, a stoic man who believed that manipulating the masses wasn't just a right, but a duty. Everything changed when Elias stumbled upon a cache of digital records, evidence of clandestine operations that had cost lives, silenced innovation, and provoked wars. His conscience caught fire. No inheritance could smother the guilt rising in him. So, he made a decision to leak the truth, even if it meant betraying his father, losing his place in the dynasty, and risking his life. Because in the world of the Illuminati, betrayal is not punished, it is erased. As you listen, imagine chandeliers casting golden shadows on old stone, the rustle of forbidden documents in deep vaults, and a network of secrets stretching through banks, media empires, and government halls, overseen by a circle bound by blood. Oaths. At the center stands Elias, ready to cast light into centuries of darkness. To some, he is a hero. To others, a threat to be eliminated without mercy. What unfolds is part conspiracy thriller, part tragic family drama. By the end, a private jet will fall from the sky, and Elias's dream of exposing the Illuminati may lie in ruins. But there is a flicker of hope. A journalist named Ava Monroe, determined to preserve his story from vanishing into myth. So settle in. Let the hush of your surroundings amplify the tension. As the narrative deepens, remember, every legend about secret societies started somewhere, with someone who saw too much. In Bloodline, the boy who exposed the light. That someone is Elias Vance, a child born into privilege, fated to challenge a power so old it feels eternal. Now, turn down the lights, keep your curiosity sharp, and stay with me through the next 5 parts, as we step onto a hidden stage where ancient secrets collide with modern ambition. And if your mind begins to slip into that liminal space between waking and sleeping, let the story guide you. Because sometimes the best truths are the ones we find in the quiet hours, when the rest of the world is fast asleep. From an early age, Elias Vance understood that his life was unlike that of other children. While classmates talked about weekend movie nights or beach outings, Elias spent his weekends stepping onto private jets bound for secluded family retreats, always to places draped in age-old shadows. The silence during these retreats was heavy, like the ancient tapestries that lined the mansion walls. Murals depicted robed figures offering mysterious symbols beneath moonlit skies. Silent servants moved with lowered eyes, avoiding even a glance toward Elias. His father, Victor Vance, loomed over every scene like a marble statue brought to life. His voice carried the chill of steel. Even during the most casual conversations, Victor never truly relaxed. "We are Vances," he often said during their talks in the study. "Our lineage stretches back to those who shaped the greatest empires in history. We hold knowledge beyond imagination. But knowledge means nothing without discipline." He always lingered on that final word, as if it were a shield standing between greatness and ruin. At the age of 8, Elias witnessed flickers of the truth. Hidden chambers within the estate revealed shadowy gatherings. Men and women in dark suits and formal gowns speaking in hushed tones. Once, he glimpsed a ritual lit by candles. Figures chanted in unison, while incense curled through the air. In the center of the floor was a stone tile bearing an ancient crest, an eye enclosed within a pyramid-like shape, glimmering ominously in the dim light. The sight filled Elias with both awe and dread. When he asked about it the next day, his father's jaw clenched. "You saw nothing. Speak of it again, and there will be consequences," Victor warned. Elias swallowed his questions, cowed by a rare intensity in his father's gaze. His school life was no less strange. He attended an elite academy where the children of oil tycoons, political families, and old money dynasties clustered into tight-knit cliques. They whispered phrases like, "Our parents run the world," and bonded over shared nannies and family alliances. Elias never quite fit in. There was always an invisible wall, as though he were playing a role in a script he hadn't read. Teachers treated him with an odd reverence, handing him awards with suspicious speed. Whenever a problem arose, it disappeared after a single phone call home. Around his 15th birthday, the illusions began to fracture. The Vance mansion hosted a masked ball. Guests arrived in gilded masks shaped like owls, serpents, and falcons. From a hidden balcony, Elias watched as they formed a circle at midnight around a raised platform. At its center stood his father. Arms outstretched, Victor Vance stood at the center of the circle, reciting solemn phrases in Latin, words about tradition, continuity, and the sacred balance of the bloodline. Then, the entire gathering joined in a single refrain. "Served perpetual morim." Serve the perpetual order. That night, Victor revealed just enough to let Elias begin piecing the truth together. "We are a part of a long lineage," Victor said, swirling amber liquid in a crystal glass, "one that ensures stability in a chaotic world. Our family invests in certain endeavors, ones that shape the course of nations. And one day, you will stand in that circle too." Elias's stomach churned with questions. How? Why? Who are these people? But his father's posture remained rigid, unmoved. "You'll understand when you come of age." The more Elias listened, the more it became clear. This wasn't about charity or elite networking. It was a centuries-old system, cloaked in secrecy and protected by unimaginable wealth. Whenever Elias voiced his doubts, Victor brushed them aside as youthful naivety. "You must learn to see the world through the lens of power," he insisted. The masses can't handle the truth. They need illusions, democracy, free markets, liberty. We provide those illusions. Elias turned 18, surrounded by grandeur and unease. A birthday celebration unfolded in a lavish hall, filled with foreign dignitaries, corporate giants, and the figures of political clout, most of whom Elias barely knew. They called him Young Master, and presented gifts rich with symbolic meaning. A ring etched with ancient sigils, a leather-bound tome of cryptic codes, a baton resembling a scepter, said to come from a forgotten realm. Instead of pride, Elias felt the crushing weight of expectation settle around him. Later that night, after the guests had departed, Victor summoned him to the old library. Moonlight filtered through stained glass windows, casting fractured color across the dusty bookshelves. On the table lay a thick, handwritten tome titled Bloodline. Its pages cataloged generations of names, sealed treaties, and cryptic accounts of pivotal events that shaped modern geopolitics. Elias turned the pages and found evidence of manipulated wars, artificial market crashes, and rigged elections, all orchestrated from the shadows. The book was the raw manuscript of every conspiracy he'd ever heard. Victor placed a heavy hand on his shoulder. "You are no longer a child. Today, you join those who guard humanity from itself. This is the truth, Elias. The world is ruled by illusion, and we are its caretakers." He paused, letting the words anchor themselves in silence. "It is a burden," Victor said, "but also a privilege. Should you betray these secrets, you betray our entire lineage." Elias stared at the swirling ink of the manuscript. Heartsick, what he once glimpsed as vague shadows now stood fully formed before him. Illusions that shaped governments, influenced economies, and determined the pace of human progress. But how many lives had been quietly shattered to maintain them? The library walls pressed in, heavy with the unspoken judgment of ancestral portraits. He nodded outwardly, the dutiful son. But deep within, doubt had begun to bloom. Could a single family, could any group, truly claim the right to govern billions from behind a curtain? Even if they believed it brought balance, who decided how much control was too much? That night, Elias tossed restlessly in bed, haunted by the vow he'd silently accepted. The weight of destiny pressed down on him, but so did the beginnings of rebellion. Would he uphold the illusion, or tear it apart? He drifted into uneasy dreams of robed figures and puppeteers, until one thought surfaced with quiet certainty. I have to learn more. I need to see how deep this truly goes before I choose my path. Years passed in a blur of elite academics and covert grooming. Under Victor's watchful eye, Elias was shaped into a refined emissary of influence. He studied international finance at an exclusive university, though study was a loose term, considering how professors bent over backward to please him. In tandem, private tutors trained him in off-the-books disciplines: infiltration, cryptography, psychological operations, crisis economics, manipulation. By the age of 25, Elias was the rising star of Vance Global Holdings, the family's multinational empire. His visionary leadership earned praise in public circles, but behind closed doors he was executing covert operations assigned by the Illuminati Council. His tasks were precise: secure foreign telecom monopolies to control data flow, manipulate public perception through carefully sequenced media acquisitions, sway regional elections to install compliant leadership. And Elias succeeded, repeatedly, but each mission hollowed him further. Then came the assignment that broke the illusion. The council ordered him to dismantle a philanthropic energy project that threatened the global oil structure. The innovation, a cheap, renewable power source, could grant independence to developing nations and unravel the tightly bound network of energy dependency. The Circle saw it as destabilizing. Elias saw it as salvation. Neutralize it, they ordered. Smear the scientists, tie them up in lawsuits, cut their funding, shut it down. Elias obeyed, executing the sabotage with frightening efficiency. Laboratories were raided under false pretenses. Grants vanished overnight. The project's lead scientist was smeared in international media. Elias watched as bright-eyed researchers were crushed under manufactured scandals. It twisted his stomach. The machinery he operated had no conscience, only momentum. One night, driven by gnawing guilt, Elias descended into the mansion's sealed archive, an area he'd always been warned to avoid. There, he found a plain digital drive labeled Global Project Summaries. What he opened was no mere report. It was an index of horrors. Hundreds of files, some recent, some centuries old, chronicled engineered wars, orchestrated pandemics, sabotaged inventions, suppressed cures. Some files dated back to the Enlightenment. Others referenced medieval dynasties, coded in cryptic allusions to secret lodges and bloodline covenants. Each document read like a confession. Each revelation a dagger. Elias felt as if the very ground beneath him cracked wide open. Wars that could have been avoided. Famines that were triggered to maintain leverage. Economies intentionally collapsed for strategic realignment. The tragedies of the world were not always accidents of history. They were often deliberate calculations. And all of it, every cold equation, was hidden behind gilded doors like these. This was not just about his father anymore. It was not even about the Vances. This was a machine built over generations, fed by arrogance, preserved by wealth, and powered by the certainty that we know best. Elias maintained a mask of loyalty while quietly copying classified data onto encrypted drives. But he needed someone who could verify its authenticity, someone outside the Circle. That search led him to Ava Monroe, an investigative journalist known for her fearless work exposing conspiracy theories and shadow networks influencing world events. Elias contacted her under a pseudonym, feeding her small but telling fragments, stories of politicians who abruptly reversed their policies after secretive meetings, or unexplained shifts in global markets following innocuous-sounding announcements. Ava, skeptical at first, had grown used to anonymous tipsters and wild claims. But the patterns in Elias's evidence were too precise, too corroborated to ignore. They established a secure line of communication using obscure cryptographic protocols. Elias sent file excerpts. Ava matched them with her own sources and began confirming the impossible. Soon, her doubt faded. "This is real," she whispered in a voice message. "I've never seen anything this damning." While their secret collaboration deepened, the Circle gave Elias a new assignment, his most disturbing yet. He was to help orchestrate a regime change in a resource-rich African country. The plan involved manipulating the nation's currency supply to destabilize its democratically elected government, clearing the path for a puppet regime more compliant with Western oil interests. The deeper Elias sank into this deception, the more revulsion stirred within him. He saw the cost of these illusions not as abstract numbers but in lives lost, families starving, freedoms crushed, futures stolen. It wasn't order, it was control masquerading as stability. The tipping point came during a private conversation with a senior member of the Circle, an older man who casually reminisced about engineering a coup decades prior. His tone was smug, devoid of remorse. "We do what's necessary," the man said with a smirk. "If we let well-meaning fools run amok, the world burns. We're the watchers on the wall." That moment broke something inside Elias. He decided he would not simply leak fragments. He would expose everything, the whole archive, the entire structure of lies. He reached out to Ava again, this time more directly. Though they had never met in person, a deep mutual trust had formed through their encrypted conversations. "I'm going to blow the lid off all of it," Elias told her. "I have decades of records, proof of global manipulation. Once the public sees it, they won't be able to unsee it." Ava's response came quickly. "They'll come for you. They might kill you." "I know," Elias replied, "but it has to be done." As the day of his final induction into the Circle's inner council approached, a ceremony meant to confirm him as one of its most trusted members, Elias played the role expected of him. Outwardly, he appeared compliant. In secret, Ava was coordinating with other journalists and whistleblowers to prepare a global data release, timed to follow Elias's personal video confession. The risk was monumental. The Circle's surveillance and counterintelligence capabilities were vast, but Elias believed in one thing: truth, once unleashed, could not be contained. At a private dinner the night before the ceremony, Victor Vance raised a toast. "Son," he said, pride shining in his eyes, "I have never been prouder. Soon you'll stand among the elders shaping tomorrow." Elias raised his glass and smiled thinly. But beneath the table his hands trembled with sweat. He saw in his mind the broken lives left behind by the Circle's manipulations, the silenced inventors, the wars disguised as diplomacy, the innovations hidden away for fear of disrupting profit. He realized he was about to betray everything he had been raised to become, and it felt liberating. That night, alone in his suite, Elias sat before a camera and began recording. "My name is Elias Vance," he said, voice steady. "My family is part of a global network that has orchestrated some of the darkest chapters in modern history. But I no longer believe in their mission. Here's the proof." He spoke plainly, calmly. Document after document, name after name. He explained how resources were hoarded, how wars were manipulated, how democracy had become a theater, its curtains pulled by invisible hands. When the recording was finished, his heart pounded. The truth was now irreversibly alive. A message flashed on his screen. It was from Ava. "We're ready. Once we get your final go-ahead, the world will see it." Elias responded with quiet finality. "Tomorrow, after the ceremony, I'll send it. No turning back." He gazed out the window at the city below. The lights shimmered like distant stars, each representing a life unaware of what tomorrow might bring. A hush fell over him. Was it the silence of anticipation or of death? He shook the thought away. "Let them come," he whispered. "I'll step into the light no matter the cost." The day of the Circle's grand gathering arrived, thick with ritual, opulence, and veiled purpose. Held at a remote estate rumored to have once hosted Templar knights, the event was a pageant of old power, black-tie formality entwined with arcane rites. Elias traveled there with his father, escorted in a sleek convoy of tinted cars. Upon arrival, every guest was instructed to surrender phones, cameras, and electronic devices. The Circle's no-tech rule was absolute. But Elias had prepared a workaround. Strapped to his wrist was what appeared to be a luxury watch. In truth, it housed a micro SD card embedded within a hidden transmitter. It held the entire archive. The plan was simple. Step away unnoticed, activate the transmission, and upload the files to decentralized servers, with Ava ready to spread them to the world. They arrived at twilight. Torches lined the path to the estate, casting flickering shadows on the old stone walls. Inside, corridors wound toward a vast hall crowned by a domed ceiling painted with mythic imagery. Gods and monsters in a cosmic struggle. Elias followed Victor down the marble floor. His father's voice was a low hum of satisfaction. "Tonight," Victor said, "you prove your loyalty. I trust you feel no second thoughts." "I'm ready," Elias replied, his voice measured, but his chest thundered with the weight of what he was about to do. He scanned the room. Power radiated from every corner, men in tailored suits, women in flowing gowns, each exuding absolute confidence. Their whispers concerned economic forecasts, asset shifts, political calibrations, the language of silent control. At the center stood a raised platform with seats reserved for the elders. Victor Vance took his place among them. The ceremony commenced with ritual chanting led by the High Elder. Ancient vows recited in dead tongues, invoking the guardianship of the grand design. Then came Elias's turn. He stepped forward, steady despite the storm inside. The High Elder slid a ring, engraved with the symbol of the iron triangle, onto his finger. Applause followed, cold, dignified, final. He bowed. To the room, he was the prodigal son returning to embrace his legacy, but in truth, he was a saboteur ready to detonate it. As the ritual dissolved into informal discussion, Elias slipped away under the pretense of reflection. No one questioned his departure. In the estate's ancient library, surrounded by dust-laced shelves, he activated his watch. 1 tap, then 2, then 3. A faint LED blinked. The signal was sent. The data began uploading to multiple secure servers. A link was simultaneously dispatched to Ava Monroe, who stood ready to unleash it across the world's decentralized networks. Within moments, the illusions would be gone, replaced by revelation. He took a deep, shuddering breath. No turning back now. He imagined the circle's faces when the news broke, the betrayal, the disbelief, and, maybe, somewhere in the world, the awakening of minds that had lived too long under shadows. He had hoped the truth would spark real change, not just more noise and confusion. Then came the sound of quiet footsteps behind him. Elias spun around. Victor Vance stood in the doorway, arms folded. "Son," he said calmly, "you seem uneasy. Is there something you wish to share?" Elias's throat tightened. Did he know? "I'm fine, Father," Elias replied, keeping his voice even. "Just overwhelmed by the ceremony." Victor stepped closer, eyes sharp. "Your induction means more than pageantry. It's a matter of trust, and I sense hesitation in you. Are you truly loyal to what we stand for?" The question felt like a trap. Elias took a breath. "I am loyal to the legacy, as I must be." Victor's gaze hardened. "Then be honest. The Council monitors all data flows. We have watchers embedded across the net. There was a disturbance just moments ago." A chill passed through Elias's spine. "Probably routine interference," he replied, as steadily as he could. "The estate's signal jammers are notoriously unreliable." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Victor gestured toward the hall. "Come, we should rejoin the others. If there was a breach, we'll find out soon enough." The message was clear, and if it was you, we'll know. Heart pounding, Elias returned to the gathering. Guests milled about, murmuring in low tones. There was tension in the air, but no outright alarm. Not yet. Maybe the leak was still undetected. 30 minutes passed. Then, a senior council member, a media mogul, stepped away to answer a discreet phone call. His expression darkened. He whispered to another elder. The ripple began. Phones buzzed quietly. Despite the no-device policy, some had broken protocol to track unfolding news. Whispers spread, data breach, Global conspiracy. Vance family implicated. The High Elder raised a hand, calling for calm. We must isolate the source. Silence fell. Eyes swept the room, looking, judging. Elias did his best to remain still. Then he met his father's stare. Victor's face changed, confusion, realization, and then fear. He knows. Victor moved, quiet but swift, seizing Elias's wrist. "What have you done?" he hissed, just above a whisper. Elias met his father's glare, trembling but resolute. "What had to be done?" he said. "The world deserves the truth." Victor's face twisted in rage. "You fool! You've destroyed everything we built, our entire legacy." Elias pulled free, and in that instant, chaos erupted. Leaders stepped aside, whispering into phones. News outlets were already issuing pre-written denials, labeling it a hoax. Some shouted for security. He ran. A guard moved to intercept him, but Elias ducked and sprinted past. The estate exploded into motion. Staff scrambling. Orders shouted. "Stop him!" He bolted across the gravel courtyard, lungs burning. Then he saw it. A parked staff car, engine idling. Without hesitation, he leapt inside, slammed the door, and floored the gas. Gravel sprayed behind him as the estate vanished in the rearview mirror. Silhouettes clustered in disarray. No one prepared for betrayal from within. He was out. But not safe. The circle's reach stretched across nations. If Ava succeeded in getting the files out far and wide, the truth would spread faster than they could stop it. But if not, he tried to contact her via secure line. No response. Possibly jammed. He kept driving, winding through empty country roads, headlights off. Just make it to dawn. But he knew, deep down, they'd be organizing his erasure already. He would be labeled a fraud, a threat. If captured, he wouldn't see trial. Only a vanishing. Behind the wheel, trembling, he whispered, "Please, let the leak make a difference." Because if the circle caught him, all that waited was an unmarked grave. And the illusion would continue, unbroken. The next week was a blur of frantic escapes. Elias moved from one safe house to another. Old allies stopped responding, silenced, or bought off. Only Ava Monroe remained in contact, using burner phones and dead-drop emails. Her messages were brief, careful. The files were out, but the response was complicated. Mainstream media labeled the leaks an elaborate fabrication. Still, whispers spread. Certain lawmakers began investigating behind closed doors. Something was cracking, but the circle was moving fast to patch it. The internet roared with noise. Screenshots of documents leaked across forums. The Vance name trended alongside terms like shadow government and engineered war. Others declared it all a deep fake campaign. Trolls flooded comment sections, branding Elias a disgruntled heir. The circle's media machine had awakened in full force. Then Ava called. Her voice was shaken. "There was an attempt on my life," she whispered. "Car accident. I walked away, barely." Elias closed his eyes. They were cleaning up. "Don't trust anything now," she warned. "Even your safe houses." He knew she was right. If they couldn't discredit him, they would erase him. He resolved to meet Ava in person. Somewhere off-grid. No digital traces. That's when the message came. A coded text from an unlisted number. "Escape route secured. Private flight to Iceland arranged. You'll be safe." It reeked of bait. The circle, perhaps. But an hour later, Ava confirmed through her own channels. She, too, had arranged a plane to Iceland. Coincidence or breach? There was no time to sort truth from trap. Iceland was known as a safe harbor for whistleblowers. Far from the circle's easy reach. He arrived at the private airstrip just before dawn. The pilot, alone, greeted him by name. No sign of Ava, but she'd said she might meet him at the landing point. The jet, a sleek, matte black craft with no markings, seemed in order. Maybe too perfect. Still, he climbed aboard. He had come too far. The pilot said little. Takeoff was smooth. Below, the city's lights faded into a sea of darkness. Elias sat back, eyes heavy, fingers cold, mind spiraling with everything he'd done, everything that might come next. 35,000 feet in the air, as the hum of engines droned and clouds swallowed the horizon. He clutched the seat's armrest and whispered to himself, "Please, let it be enough." Iceland. There, Elias hoped he could coordinate the next wave. A broader release of the files, free from the circle's direct reach. Maybe the story would finally break through the noise. Maybe the world would listen. He glanced at his phone. No signal, as expected. He opened a text file and wrote a final offline note to Ava. "If we're parted, keep fighting. I'll find you." A strange weight settled in his chest. A premonition. Not fear, exactly. Something colder. Finality. An hour into the flight, turbulence rocked the jet. Elias tightened his seatbelt. The pilot's voice crackled through the intercom. Mild weather front ahead, shouldn't be an issue. But the shaking worsened. Then came a sharp alarm tone from the cockpit. Elias stood and made his way forward. The pilot looked tense, flipping switches. "We're losing instrumentation," he muttered. Might be a systems glitch, or sabotage. The word struck Elias like a bolt of ice. Sabotage. At 20,000 feet, that meant only one thing. Outside, lightning streaked across the sky. The aircraft shuddered violently. "We need to land," Elias said, trying to stay calm. The pilot nodded, activating the emergency beacon, but the radio only hissed with static. "No response," the pilot muttered. "It's like the signal's being jammed." Another jolt rocked the plane. The cockpit lights flickered. Altitude readings danced erratically. Elias's mind spiraled. Was this it? The final solution? Victor Vance's last command. No traitor survives. The pilot gritted his teeth. "We're losing control. I can't hold altitude." Elias grabbed the emergency radio and tried other channels. At last, one voice answered, distorted but real. Then silence again, cut off, jammed. The plane pitched steeply downward. Elias tightened every belt he could find, heart hammering in his chest. Time slowed, lights dimmed. If he survived the crash, the circle might still come to finish the job. Then the pilot shouted, "Grace! Grace! Grace!" A second later, the world exploded. A symphony of shrieking metal, blinding flashes, water slamming through the fuselage like a cannon blast. Cold, so cold. Darkness swallowed him. Somewhere in that storm of chaos, he felt the cabin tear apart, felt water fill his lungs. His limbs froze, but something in him refused to die. He found a tear in the fuselage, forced his way through, scraping his arms. The emergency beacon flashed once, twice, then died. Then, nothing. He woke hours later, or maybe minutes, or days, adrift, clinging to a chunk of broken fuselage, salt water in his throat, bruises on every inch of skin. Above him, a ceiling of stars. Pain radiated through his chest as he coughed seawater. But he was alive. For now. His thoughts spiraled. Don't let them win. Don't let them bury the truth. Then a sound. Distant. An engine? A boat? Reality shimmered like heat. He remembered Ava's contingency plans, the decoy manifests. Could she have diverted the flight at the last moment? Then blackness again. In the news, the story was simple. Private jet crashes over North Atlantic. Elias Vance presumed dead. Mechanical failure was cited. Coverage was brief. Investigations closed quickly. No bodies recovered. A funeral followed, polished, hollow. World leaders sent flowers. Business titans paid stiff-lipped respects. Victor Vance stood before the cameras. He offered no tears, just a short, cold statement. "We will honor my son's memory." No mention of whistleblowing. No mention of files. No hint of betrayal. Just another young life gone too soon. But in the forgotten alleys of the internet, rumors lived on. Fragments of the Vance archive circulated, despite the Circle's efforts to erase them. Domains vanished. Hosting sites were stripped. Social media flagged the leaks as synthetic disinformation. Experts flooded airwaves, denouncing the documents as deepfake propaganda. Ironically, the most revealing files were dismissed because they were too unbelievable, but not everyone bought the story. Ava Monroe had never boarded that flight. She'd sensed the trap. She had fallback plans with Elias. If he vanished, she'd carry the flame. And now, she did. She released fragments of the archive through obscure platforms, seeding them to journalists in underground channels. Cryptographers, academics, ex-intelligence officers began forming a mosaic too intricate to ignore. It wasn't just speculation, it was pattern recognition. War. Collapse. Coincidence. Then the Vance ledger, explaining what had really happened. But each time momentum built, the Circle struck back. Websites disappeared. Reporters were silenced. Threads vanished. Then, one day, Ava received an unmarked package. Inside, a battered wristwatch. Elias's? The same device that had sent the archive. There was a note. He tried. "Now it's your turn. No signature, no return address." Had he survived? Had someone found it? Or had he tossed it into the ocean as a message? She slid the watch onto her wrist and swore she would not let the truth die. Public reaction faded quickly. The internet's flood of conspiracy theories left people numb. Some embraced the story. Graffiti appeared. Elias lives. Murals showed his face with a candle in hand. One, painted in a shadowed alley, read, "He exposed the light." Most scrolled past, distracted, exhausted, cynical. But in whispered corners, something lingered. Something dangerous. A belief. That maybe, just maybe, the illusion could be shattered. In hidden basements, printouts of the Vance files were studied. Dates cross-checked. Patterns unearthed. Governments and corporations were quietly questioned. Historians began revising timelines. The official narrative cracked. Not broken yet, but fractured. Victor Vance remained the image of composure. In public, he gave nothing away. In private, he seethed. He mourned the loss of his son, and loathed him for the betrayal. A legacy undone, a lineage threatened. But the seed had been planted. In secrecy, the Circle continued. Their rituals, their influence, their quiet control. Business as usual. But in the edges of the world, whispers spread. Journalists whispered. Protesters organized. Academics dared ask forbidden questions. The illusion held, for now. But somewhere beneath the surface, a fire still burned. And the name Elias Vance was not forgotten. The revelations did not spark an immediate revolution. The world didn't rise as one. But the fractures deepened. Governments were forced to issue vague denials, or else deflect attention through spectacle. The Circle retaliated with sharpened propaganda and tighter control of the narrative. People felt the tension building, though few could name its source. The silence surrounding Elias's story only intensified its strange power. He became something spectral, part ghost, part prophet. To some, a fool. To others, the only heir who had dared to defy destiny. In an unremarkable house nestled along a forgotten coastline, Ava Monroe preserved what might one day be the most important artifact of all. A final hard drive labeled Eve Legacy. It contained Elias's full, uncut confession, unedited, unaltered. She left a note. If you're reading this, you hold the future in your hands. He died so people could see what hides in the dark. Don't waste it. Sometimes, late at night, she revisited old messages from Elias. His dry humor, his sincerity, the ache in his voice when he described the machinery of deception that had consumed generations. She often wondered, if the world were different, if they'd won together, what life might have been. But real life rarely offers clean endings. And so, Ava continued, quietly, defiantly, because once you've seen behind the curtain, there is no going back. Elias Vance had looked into the gears of empire and chosen to snap the chain. They silenced his body, but not the resonance of his act. His truth endured in fragments, files, rumors, a seed scattered in shadow. The circle remained powerful, but somewhere, in encrypted servers, underground forums, and midnight murals, a spark lived on, and the hush in the halls of power no longer felt invulnerable. That is the story of the boy who exposed the light. He was born to uphold the illusion. He chose to speak instead, and in that choice, gave the world a glimpse of the truth long buried beneath comfort. His name lingers in whispered forums, encrypted archives, subversive graffiti, and the quiet resolve of those who dare to challenge fate. Elias Vance stands now as a flickering flame in the dark, testament to what it costs to tell the truth, and what it means to carry it forward. Transmission 0, the Cross Anomaly. Some say what followed came from classified research that was never meant to see daylight. Others claim it began with a dream. Daniel Cross jolted upright in bed, sheets tangled around him like restraints. Sweat clung to his skin. The dream had returned, vivid, electric, horrifying. He saw tunnels lit in pulsing blue, cold metal chairs, straps biting into his wrists, and always the voices. Subject 17 demonstrates increased receptivity, neural amplitude elevated by 30%. He blinked. The room was dark. The television, which he had turned off before sleep, now flickered with static. Within the noise, something called to him. Not a voice, a sound just beneath the threshold of hearing, a vibration that pulled at the seams of his memory, like invisible fingers prying open a locked door. Daniel stepped closer to the screen. In the chaos of static, geometric patterns began to emerge, shapes that defied randomness. His own reflection in the glass seemed wrong, as if someone else were watching him from the other side. Delta Protocol 17, he whispered. The words came unbidden, from some buried part of his mind. Phase bend. Initiate. The hum rose, becoming a shrill whine that made his teeth ache. Then, the screen went black. Daniel stood frozen in the darkness, unaware that tears were running down his cheeks. By morning, he told himself it had been a nightmare. Nothing more. But as he brushed his teeth, he noticed a mark behind his ear. Small, red, perfectly round, like a healed puncture wound. He had no memory of receiving it. The dreams worsened. They repeated. Cold rooms, test sequences, always younger, maybe 11, maybe 12. Always the same faces in lab coats. Always the same chair. And always, in the background, a radar tower. Monolithic. Familiar. When he wasn't working, writing security code for a defense contractor, Daniel found himself sketching the tower. Over and over, his apartment walls filled with drawings, the radar from different angles, the coastline behind it, the symbols his hand produced seemingly on its own. One day over lunch, his colleague Martin frowned at him. "You look like hell, Dan. Sleeping okay?" Daniel hesitated. "Weird dreams. What kind?" "Some kind of facility, tests, a tower near the ocean." Martin's fork froze mid-air. "What kind of tower?" "I think it's an FPS-35, Cold War era. Huge cowling." Martin set down his fork. "That's oddly specific for a dream." "I know, and there's something else." Daniel lowered his voice. "When there's static on the TV, I sometimes hear something, like a signal." "What kind of signal?" "It doesn't say words, it's like a beacon, like it's calling me." Martin was quiet for a long moment. "You ever heard of Camp Hero?" Daniel froze. "Out in Montauk," Martin added. The name sent a jolt through Daniel's spine. His coffee cup slipped from suddenly numb fingers and shattered on the floor. "Jesus, are you okay?" Martin said, jumping back. "I need to go there," Daniel murmured. Montauk. The drive to Long Island took 4 hours, but to Daniel, it felt like returning to a place he'd never left. As he crossed into Montauk, a strange pressure built behind his eyes. Not pain, more like a sixth sense coming online. The roads narrowed. Pines thickened. His GPS cut out, twice, but Daniel didn't need it. His hands drove on instinct, guiding him down roads he shouldn't know. The trees broke into scrubland. And there it was. The tower, just as he'd drawn it 100 times. Camp Hero. The decommissioned Air Force base loomed against the pale sky. Concrete buildings and sealed bunkers sprawled across forgotten earth. A rusting sign proclaimed it a state park, but the fencing was too clean, the cameras too functional. Inside the weathered visitor center, a tired ranger glanced up from her crossword. "Closing in an hour," she said flatly. "I was wondering if you could tell me about the underground levels," Daniel asked, trying to keep his voice even. Her pencil stopped mid-letter. She stared. "There aren't any underground levels open to the public." "But they exist." The air turned colder. "If you're one of those conspiracy freaks—" "I've been here before," Daniel interrupted. She froze. "That's not possible," she snapped. "This was locked down until 92. Daniel stepped closer. "What about the Montauk project?" The ranger's face went blank. She reached for the phone. "Park's closing early. You need to leave." "I just have a few—" "Now," she said, finger hovering over the keypad, "or I call security." Daniel left, pamphlet crumpled in his hand. As he pulled from the lot, a black SUV with government plates passed him, heading in. He didn't look back. As Daniel drove past the entrance to Camp Hero, he noticed someone in the passenger seat of the black SUV quickly snap a photo of his license plate. Instead of leaving town, he veered off and headed toward the public beach adjacent to the decommissioned base. From there, he followed a narrow trail that traced the edge of the Atlantic bluffs. The radar tower remained visible above the treetops, looming like a sentinel as he walked. When he reached the chain-link fence that marked the boundary of the base, a strange dual sensation washed over him. One part awe, one part memory. His conscious mind told him he was seeing the place for the first time. Yet something deeper insisted otherwise. Without hesitation, he moved 20 yards to the left. The fence there had been cut and rewelded at some point. He had known that, without ever learning it. Sure enough, the newer section was exactly where he had anticipated. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, Daniel followed the edge of a collapsed bluff that formed a hidden descent to a narrow, stony beach. The seawall extended along the base, graffiti-tagged and worn by decades of ocean spray. He ran his hand along the cracked concrete, stopping when his fingers found a small recess. It was an old electrical box, half-eaten by rust. Without knowing why, he keyed in a sequence, 8135. Nothing. He tried again, 8315. Still nothing. Finally, 8153. A low, mechanical groan rumbled from within the wall. A panel shifted, almost imperceptibly, revealing a hidden seam. He pushed. The section swung inward on silent hinges, revealing a dark passage that descended into the earth. A wave of mildew, ozone, and something chemical swept over him. It struck his nostrils like a memory. He turned on his phone's flashlight and stepped inside. The concrete gave way to rough-cut stone, slick with condensation. The passage sloped downward. Daniel didn't navigate. It was more like he remembered. 50 yards in, the tunnel opened into a dilapidated room cluttered with collapsed shelves and rusted machinery. But Daniel knew this had never been a utility space. He crossed to the far wall, where a metal door hung slightly ajar. Beyond it, the darkness was so absolute it seemed to consume his light. As he stepped closer, the dizziness returned. Fractured images slammed into his mind. Children in hospital gowns, men with clipboards, a hulking chair surrounded by humming machinery. And always, the tests. Focus on the light, Daniel. Tell us what you see through the gateway. His phone slipped from suddenly lifeless fingers and hit the floor. He collapsed. The last thing he saw before darkness overtook him was a symbol scratched into the metal door, a triangle intersected by a perfect circle. When Daniel awoke, he was lying on the sand. Waves lapped at his feet. The stars were out. His clothes were soaked with salt water, though he had no memory of entering the ocean. His phone was gone, and when he looked back at the seawall, the entrance, the secret door, was gone too. Not just sealed, erased as if it had never existed. Dazed, Daniel checked his watch. It read 9:03 p.m., but the date had changed. He had lost almost 3 full days. The drive home to Connecticut passed in a surreal blur. The hum of tires, the flick of headlights. His body moved. His mind reeled. Memories he should not have possessed unfurled like suppressed dreams. The chair. The Montauk chair, they had called it. A hybrid of alien technology and Tesla-era experimentation. He remembered being strapped in. Remembered the moment his consciousness felt pulled through the crown of his skull, stretched like a tether across dimensions. And he remembered what they made him do while connected. Back in his apartment, he didn't sleep. He paced, scribbled, listed names he had no right to know. Dr. Marcus Bennett, the lead scientist with glacier blue eyes. Cameron Hayes, the chain-smoking military liaison. And Preston Nichols, the technician who sometimes sneaked the children candy when the others weren't looking. Nichols? That name felt important. At dawn, Daniel called in sick and drove to the public library. The librarian raised an eyebrow when he asked about the Montauk Project, but pointed him toward a small shelf of conspiracy literature. There, wedged between books on MK Ultra and Roswell, was a worn paperback. The Montauk Project. Experiments in Time by Preston B. Nichols and Peter Moon. Daniel's hands trembled as he flipped through it. Everything was there. The hidden base at Camp Hero, the psychic experiments, the chair, claims of dimensional manipulation, time travel. A beast pulled through from beyond. The book claimed the project ended in 1983, after a catastrophic manifestation known as the Beast broke containment and forced the facility's closure. But Daniel knew better. It hadn't ended. It had evolved. The techniques refined at Montauk had been scattered across other facilities, each fragment buried deeper than the last, distributed so no single failure could reveal the whole machine. That night, back in his apartment, Daniel stood before his closet and stared at a locked metal box on the top shelf. He didn't remember placing it there, but he knew what it held. The key was taped beneath the dresser. Inside the box was a safety deposit key from U.S. Bank. The next morning, Daniel walked into First National Bank in downtown Hartford and presented both the key and his ID. A manager escorted him into the vault. Alone with the metal drawer, Daniel opened it. Inside was a manila envelope sealed with red tape marked Federal Access Only. He broke it. Photographs tumbled out. Black and white images of children in lab rooms. Some of the photos showed him, no more than 10 years old, hooked to machines, electrodes taped to his temples. In one, he sat in the chair, surrounded by coiled cables, Tesla coils arcing in the background. There were documents, too. Schematics, diagrams, cryptic formulas that made his eyes water. A map of Camp Hero with subterranean chambers marked in red. At the bottom of the pile sat a CD-ROM in a plain sleeve. No markings save a date. August 12, 1983. And then he found the page that made his blood run cold. A printed roster labeled Project Subjects, Delta Group, and at the very top, Subject 17, Primary Gate Opener. That night, with trembling fingers, Daniel inserted the disk into his laptop. After a few seconds of mechanical whirring, a single video file appeared on the screen. The footage was raw, grainy, black and white, shot from a fixed security camera. It showed a concrete room dominated by the machine he'd been sketching obsessively for weeks. The chair. A boy, himself, was strapped into it. Electrodes attached to his temples. Men in lab coats surrounded banks of humming equipment. Military personnel stood like statues near the doors. Off camera, a voice began the countdown. Delta Protocol initiating in 3, 2, 1. The facility lights dimmed. The chair thrummed with energy. Young Daniel's body jerked, his spine arching inhumanly, eyes rolling back as sparks erupted from nearby monitors. Technicians backed away. Something was going wrong. Then, at the center of the room, the air tore, not like cloth, but like fabric between realities. A dark void opened, writhing, pulsing, alive. From within that abyss, something began to emerge. The camera distorted. Static overtook the image. Screams rose. When the picture returned, chaos had gripped the room. Blood spattered the wall. Technicians fled. And at the edge of the frame, just visible, was a form that could not exist. A mass of shifting geometry, angles that bent in impossible ways. The final clear image before the feed cut to static was young Daniel staring into the lens. Blood streamed from his nose and ears. His mouth moved, speaking directly to his future self. You have to shut it down before it opens again. Daniel ejected the disk with shaking hands. The images faded, but the memories, they didn't. They surged forward, locked doors in his mind crashing open. He remembered everything now. Every test, every scream, every lie. The next morning, Daniel called the only person who might understand. He didn't remember how he knew the number, only that it was buried in him. A voice answered, old, guarded. Hello? Is this Preston Nichols? A long pause. Who's asking? "My name is Daniel Cross," he said. "I was Subject 17 at Montauk." Silence, long enough that he thought the line had gone dead. Then the voice returned, softer, almost broken. "God help you, boy. They're still watching. I need answers. Not over the phone. They're always listening." Another pause. "The lighthouse. Tomorrow. Noon." The line went dead. Daniel arrived at Montauk Point Lighthouse an hour early. He had ditched his own vehicle, rented a car, changed phones twice. Paranoia had become procedure. The sky was heavy with storm clouds, the air thick with salt. The historic red and white tower stood tall, indifferent to the weight of memory around it. He saw Nichols immediately, an older man in a fisherman's jacket, sitting alone on a bench facing the sea. Without turning, Nichols spoke as if continuing a conversation from long ago. "They told us we were serving our country, advancing the human frontier, unlocking potential." He spat onto the ground. "What a load of horse shit." Daniel sat beside him. "You were there. You helped them." Nichols finally turned. His eyes were tired. His hands trembled as he lit a cigarette. "And I've spent 40 years trying to undo it." He studied Daniel's face. "Jesus, you grew up. Last time I saw you, you were a skinny kid with too much power in your head. What did they do to me? You were different, even among the sensitives. Most of the children could observe. Some could manipulate small objects. But you could open. Open what?" Nichols stared at the water. That was the question, wasn't it? At first, it was just remote viewing. But soon they realized you weren't just seeing other places. You were reaching them. He took a drag, exhaled slowly. First, it was different rooms, then different times, minutes, hours. Eventually, years. By 82, you were opening doors to places that weren't here. Daniel said it softly. "The beast." Nichols froze. "You remember?" "I saw the recording." Nichols exhaled sharply, his eyes haunted. "Then you know. What came through wasn't from another country, not from another time. It was from somewhere else entirely, a place that doesn't follow our rules." He crushed the cigarette beneath his boot. "We lost 16 people before we cut power. And the thing didn't die. It just folded itself into a dimension we can't perceive." Daniel's vision blurred. Images shimmered at the edge of his mind. "They shut it down." "Officially," Nichols said grimly, "but you know better. They just went deeper. Compartmentalized it." He leaned close, eyes sharp. "The real question is, why are you remembering now? Programming that advanced doesn't break on its own." Before Daniel could answer, the world shifted. It was like watching two films overlap. He saw the lighthouse as it was now, and as it had been decades earlier. Blue skies, different clothes on Nichols. Two timelines, flickering, merged. Nichols spoke again, voice doubled by echo. "It's happening again." Daniel reeled, nauseated by the visual discord. "What's happening to me?" "Time is bleeding," Nichols whispered. "You were never disconnected from the chair. It went dormant, but the connection remained." He gripped Daniel's arm, his face shimmering between old and young. "There's still an access point. Bunker 14, near the old power station. They never sealed it." The world trembled. Reality folded. When it stabilized, Nichols was gone. In his place stood a teenage boy, wearing a Camp Hero security badge, same voice, same words. "Find the failsafe," he said, "before it's too late." Then the boy flickered and vanished. Daniel was alone. Bennett's smile was thin and joyless. It didn't reach his eyes. "We're not just opening the gate for something, Daniel," he said, turning toward the glowing monitors. "We're opening it for someone. Or, more accurately, someone's." He gestured to a large display where rapid-fire images flashed across the screen. Diagrams of advanced weaponry, augmented human prototypes, neurological overlays that hinted at enhancements far beyond known science. "Our visitors have so much to offer," Bennett continued. "Technology, power, evolutionary advancement. All they ask in return is an environment suitable for integration, hosts who can survive the transition." "They're not visitors," Daniel said, his voice low but steady, realization solidifying like ice in his gut. "They're invaders, and you're handing them the door key." Bennett didn't respond. He turned to the technicians and gave the order. "Begin initialization. Power to 70%. The chair beneath Daniel began to hum, a vibration rising through his spine. Familiar sensations returned. The unbearable stretch, like his mind was being pulled from his body and expanded across distant dimensions. On the surrounding monitors, waveforms pulsed erratically, signaling the formation of a dimensional aperture. A voice called out from a nearby console. Quantum tunneling effect confirmed, temporal aperture forming. Daniel closed his eyes. They thought he was just a tool, a living switch to open their doorway, but they had forgotten something critical, something even he had only recently remembered. He wasn't the key, he was the doorway. In 1983, in those final seconds before the beast tore into their world, young Daniel had done something desperate. He had embedded a failsafe into the quantum structure of the chair, a hidden backdoor only he could access. And now, as power surged and reality strained, he reached for it. His consciousness stretched, extending through the walls of space-time. He could feel them on the other side, those vast ancient intelligences pressing against the veil, testing its limits like fingers probing the surface of a soap bubble. And they were hungry. "Aperture at 60%, someone reported. "Dimensional breach imminent." Bennett leaned in close, his voice hushed with anticipation. "Can you feel them, Daniel? They've waited so long to meet us properly." "Yes," Daniel whispered, eyes still shut. "I can feel them." Then, softly but clearly, "They're not what you think." Suddenly, sparks erupted from several machines. Lights dimmed, then surged. Sirens blared. "Power spike," a technician shouted. "Systems drawing more than maximum input." Bennett snapped around. "That's not possible. Check the relays." "It's me," Daniel interrupted, voice oddly serene, as blood trickled from his nose. "I'm the power source now. I always was." The room trembled. Equipment shuddered. Energy bled from every circuit and pooled into the chair. Daniel's body began to glow faintly, light radiating from his skin, the metal beneath him hot enough to scorch, but he didn't flinch. At the center of the chamber, space twisted. Air bent. The aperture opened wide, revealing glimpses of a world that should not be seen. Vast structures that defied geometry, lights with no source, physics that spiraled in defiance of order. "Yes," Bennett cried, drunk on awe. "It's working." But a technician grabbed his sleeve. "Sir, he's redirecting the aperture. The subject is altering the coordinates." "Override him. Cut direct input." "We can't. He's bypassed every safeguard." Daniel opened his eyes. They glowed with cold, shadowless light. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonic tones that rattled glass and vibrated bone. "I'm not opening the door for them to come here," he said. "I'm creating a vacuum, a one-way passage. They go back, and everything that came with them goes too." The vortex grew, a swirling void streaked with impossible colors. Loose objects whipped across the floor. The scream of rushing air became deafening. A guard lost his footing and was pulled into the aperture. His body twisted, stretched, and then vanished. "You'll destroy everything," Bennett shouted, crawling toward a control panel. "Only the infection," Daniel replied. "The chair, the knowledge, the intrusion. Everything that doesn't belong." The void swallowed the chair, warping metal, unraveling circuitry at the molecular level. Machines imploded, data corrupted beyond recovery. The chamber groaned as structural supports failed. Concrete cracked. Pipes burst. Bennett lunged, reaching for Daniel's arm, his face contorted with fury. "We were so close." Daniel met his gaze with something almost like pity. "They were never going to share, Doctor. We were never allies. We were cattle." The floor beneath them buckled, and from the collapsing aperture came something immense, something ancient, pulling back into its world after 4 decades spent slithering between ours. The beast of Montauk, its shape impossible, its form glimpsed only in half-sensed impressions. A shifting constellation of eyes, a blur of bent space, a hunger carved into thought. In Daniel's mind, a voice spoke without sound. "You have closed this way. But there are other doors, other keys." Darkness surged. With a final surge of will, Daniel poured every ounce of his being into the collapsing gateway, sealing it, not with machinery, but with his mind, and then he knew nothing more. He woke to the soft beeping of hospital monitors and sunlight filtered through Venetian blinds. Daniel lay in a sterile room, his body aching, every movement slow and deliberate. A nurse noticed he was conscious and called for the doctor, a gentle-faced woman who told him he'd been found unconscious on the beach near Montauk Point, suffering from dehydration, exposure, and some kind of neural trauma. He'd been in a coma for 6 days. When she asked what had happened, Daniel said he didn't remember. 3 days later, he signed himself out against medical advice. When he returned to his apartment, something was wrong. Everything was in place, and yet he could feel it, like fingerprints pressed into the walls of his life. An unseen presence, a psychic residue. His computer was gone. So were his notebooks, every sketch, every memory. In their place sat a single manila folder. Inside, a 1-page offer of employment from the Department of Energy, a position in an advanced research division. Salary, triple his current. No interview required. The message was clear. Forget. Take the money. Keep quiet. Live your life under supervision. Daniel stared at the folder for a long time. Then he smiled faintly, because he remembered everything. And the truth was still alive. Daniel burned the offer letter without hesitation. Over the following week he went to work, moving like a man with purpose, his steps silent but certain. He purchased specialized equipment from scattered vendors, paying in cash, never the same store twice, a high-end laptop, parts of old military-grade broadcast gear, circuitry scavenged from amateur radio shops. Piece by piece, he constructed a transmission system powerful enough to hijack signal bands and ride the veins of the Internet, quietly inserting itself into the constant noise of modern life. In a cheap motel room paid for under a false name, Daniel connected the final wires and powered the device. The setup was crude, but it didn't need elegance, only reach. It would crawl through digital infrastructure, cling to low-priority servers, embed itself in forgotten forums and fringe channels. It wouldn't matter if they found him now. He sat before the camera and pressed record. "My name is Daniel Cross," he began, his voice steady despite the tremble in his hands. "Until recently, I was Subject 17 of a classified government program known as the MTOC Project. What I'm about to tell you may sound like science fiction. I wish it were. He paused, eyes flickering to the corner of the screen as the feed stabilized. Montauk isn't a myth. It's not some fringe conspiracy. It's real. In the late 1970s and early 80s, the government conducted experiments in psychic warfare, teleportation, and interdimensional contact at a decommissioned Air Force base in Montauk, New York. They used children with rare mental abilities. I was one of them. Daniel leaned forward slightly. They built a machine, what they called the Montauk chair, designed to amplify those abilities. With it, the human mind wasn't just reading thoughts or bending spoons. It was opening holes in reality. He took a shaky breath, and through those holes, something answered. The words hung heavy in the air. He let them linger. These weren't friendly explorers. They weren't guides or teachers. They were predators. Intelligent, patient, and ravenous. They gave our scientists what they wanted: glimpses of advanced technology, biological enhancements, knowledge that shouldn't exist. In return, they asked for access. He shook his head. And the men in charge, they agreed. Daniel's nose had begun to bleed again, a slow, crimson line. He wiped it absently and continued. In 1983, something broke through. We called it the Beast. 16 people died in minutes. Officially, the project was shut down. But that was a lie. They simply buried it deeper, fragmented it across multiple black sites, changed the names, moved the equipment. He looked into the lens with grim finality. Last week, they tried again. They brought me back, Subject 17, the most successful gate opener. But I collapsed the gateway, I destroyed the chair, I sealed the breach. Another pause. A tremor ran through him, but his voice never wavered. They can't come through directly anymore. But their influence lingers. They speak in dreams and promises. They've compromised people. Scientists, politicians, media figures, not by possession, by persuasion, whispers of power and control. He gestured to the pile of documents beside him. I'm uploading proof. Images, maps, partially recovered research, coordinates to suspected continuation sites. If you're watching this, you'll find links embedded in the metadata. Redundancy protocols will trigger releases if I disappear. They can't erase all of it. His voice lowered, but his tone sharpened. Watch for the signs. Military installations where none should be, strange weather patterns, clusters of missing children, especially those described as gifted. These are the fingerprints of Montauk's legacy. He leaned even closer, eyes dim with exhaustion but alight with something fiercer. The barrier between worlds has been weakened. Sometimes things slip through without a formal gate. If you feel it, if something in your soul says this is wrong, trust it. Memory is a dangerous thing, especially when it remembers the future. The video ended. Daniel encrypted and uploaded the files using a distribution protocol designed to scatter the information across thousands of servers. The broadcast seeded itself in data streams, buried within torrents, quietly surfacing in places where eyes were already open. As the final upload finished, static consumed his laptop screen. Within the electronic haze, a pattern emerged. A signal he now recognized. Not their signal. Someone else's, a beacon. Other children of Montauk were waking up. Daniel shut the laptop and began packing his few possessions. Through the tattered curtains, he saw 2 black SUVs pull into the parking lot. Men in dark suits stepped out, moving with the rigid discipline of trained operatives. They were too late. The truth was already loose, weaving through the neural network of the digital world. Even if they found him, they couldn't kill what had already been seen. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed and waited. He wasn't afraid anymore. They had made him forget. But forgetting was never permanent. The power they had unlocked in him wasn't gone. It had merely gone dormant, waiting for the right moment to return. And it had returned. As footsteps approached his door, Daniel reached inward, into the mesh of quantum threads that connected time and space. The technology they had created had always been incomplete. What he was went far beyond it. He vanished before the agents entered the room. No broken window, no exit. Just a single phone left behind on the bed, glowing softly. On the screen, a text message addressed to Dr. Bennett. There are other doors, other keys, and now I have them all. 3 days later, across thousands of computer screens worldwide, a strange symbol appeared for only a second. A triangle intersected by a perfect circle. It was gone before anyone could screenshot it. The MTalk project was never officially acknowledged. Those who spoke too loudly suffered accidents or vanished entirely. The video was dismissed, debunked, discredited. But something had changed. People began to notice things. Children spoke of dreams they shouldn't have. Dreams of deep underground halls, of cold machines and men in lab coats. Dreams of gates, of light that hurt to look at, of a boy in a chair. Somewhere the membrane had thinned, and some doors, never truly close. A story about memory, power, and the price of truth. Documented reports of unexplained temporal anomalies began surfacing near certain government installations. Sometimes, they flickered faintly in the white noise between radio stations or in the static of untuned televisions. Listeners described hearing a voice, barely perceptible, repeating a chilling phrase. They made us forget. But memory is a dangerous thing, especially when it remembers the future. Our story is called False Skies, a conspiracy thriller about a government's darkest deception and the whistleblower who risked everything to expose it. It imagines a world where the worst terrorist attack in modern history was not only foreseen, but deliberately orchestrated. The purpose? To ignite endless war, to funnel billions into the sprawling, unaccountable military-industrial complex. 2 decades later, an unassuming former FBI data analyst named Thomas Keane uncovers hidden documents pointing to a monstrous betrayal. When he leaks the files, he becomes the most wanted man in the country. Hunted by a shadow agency desperate to preserve the official narrative, Keane races to reveal the truth to a public that may not be ready to hear it. If your eyes grow heavy during this story, that's okay. It's richly detailed, meant to lull and provoke in equal measure. Perhaps you'll drift off pondering how fear becomes profitable. Or perhaps you'll stay riveted, peeling back each layer of deception. Either way, by the end, I hope you'll see how tightly power clings to the shadows once it's tasted control. So, shall we begin? Settle in. Let your breathing slow. Imagine the flicker of old CRT screens, confidential memos, top-secret binders, and a few missing pages capable of altering the fate of entire nations. Thomas Keane didn't feel like a revolutionary when he pressed send. He felt like a man crushed by the weight of guilt. The flash drive he held was stuffed with classified files, FBI memos, encrypted communications, shipping manifests. The file name was innocuous: Black Dust. It gave no hint of the explosive evidence it contained. Keane sat alone in a dusty motel room off a forgotten highway. The air smelled of stale coffee and mildew. A battered laptop hummed on a warped table. The Wi-Fi signal barely held, but it was enough. His fingers trembled as he verified the secure connection one last time. Then, for the thousands who had died and the millions misled, he uploaded Black Dust to an overseas leak site known for hosting dangerous truths. Within the hour, the file landed in the inboxes of several independent journalists and a global media outlet famous for defying government censors. Editors and analysts whispered in alarm behind closed doors, racing to verify data fragments. By evening, the first headlines surfaced. Timid, hedging, unverified documents allegedly reveal plot behind major terror event. Mainstream media responded predictably. Skepticism, mockery, dismissal. Talking heads labeled it an AI-generated hoax, a foreign disinformation effort, digital fiction. But not everyone was convinced. The files were too consistent. Typed memos from high-level intelligence briefings, dated months before the attack, discussed the necessity of a catalytic event to justify long-term military engagement. Logs detailed suspicious insurance policy expansions on specific floors of government towers. Internal stand-down orders for military exercises aligned with the exact timeline of the attack. Back in his motel, Keene watched a breathless anchor explain the leak, stumbling over the words alleged and unsubstantiated. Then came the official denial. The manhunt would begin next. Keene shut the laptop, stuffed it into a canvas bag, and disappeared into the night. He had worked in the FBI's Data Analytics Division for nearly 10 years. His specialty, anomaly correlation. Over time, patterns emerged. Patterns he wasn't supposed to see. Private defense contractors, intelligence heads, corporate executives, all with direct profit motives tied to the wars that followed the attacks. He began quietly archiving files, waiting for the moment he had the courage to act. That moment had come. Inside the intelligence community, alarms blared. The name Thomas Keene triggered memories. An old audit, a flagged report. Within hours, calls were placed from a black-budget agency known only to a handful of government insiders. A man named Eldridge Shaw, director of this nameless division, initiated what he called containment protocols. He believed the official version of events must remain unchallenged. The post-attack order depended on it. By midnight, national bulletins labeled Keene a domestic threat, a suspected hacker. Agents tracked every digital footprint, reviewed every camera feed around the FBI headquarters. Shaw made a personal call to top executives at major media conglomerates. Coverage was to be minimized until further review. They complied. But it was too late. The genie was out. On social media, the hashtag #BlackDust exploded. Amateur analysts dissected every memo. Some IT professionals traced the IPs from internal messages to known government servers. Even partial confirmation was enough to spark outrage. If authentic, the files proved that elements within the U.S. government had not just predicted the terror event, but abetted it, maximizing casualties for political gain. A new phrase entered public vocabulary: false skies, a metaphor for the carefully painted reality above them, crafted to hide the truth beneath. Protests ignited outside federal buildings. Crowds demanded transparency. The official response: repeated denials. Foreign interference, they insisted. But hackers sympathetic to Keene threatened to release even more files if the blackout continued. Stocks in military contractors began to wobble. Rumors of insider trading from 20 years ago resurfaced. From a forest cabin, a friend's forgotten property, Keene listened to the fallout on an old radio. He felt the narrative collapsing, and the machine tightening around him. The next morning, the FBI publicly named him as the primary suspect behind the leak. They painted him as a radical, a disgruntled ex-employee with extremist leanings. His old colleagues gave no comment, but in private, many knew the truth. One name surfaced amid the chaos: Sarah Voss, a blacklisted investigative journalist once respected, until her relentless digging into the official 9/11 story earned her exile from mainstream newsrooms. When she saw the documents, she recognized them instantly. She'd seen fragments before. Hints whispered by retired agents. A truth buried too deep. Through encrypted channels, she reached out to the leak site. "I can help verify. Let me speak to the source." The message reached Keene. He hesitated, then responded in cipher. "It's all real. Meet me. We have a story to finish." And so, a fragile alliance was born, one that might bring down an empire of lies, if it survived what came next. Not everyone reacted the same way to the revelations. Some believed them wholeheartedly, others recoiled, threatened by the idea that 2 decades of war and surveillance had been built on deliberate orchestration. Thomas Keene, now branded a fugitive, appeared on every national watch list. He had once been a mid-level FBI data analyst, known for meticulous work and for quietly raising concerns about inconsistent pre-9/11 intelligence. The day he resigned, no one suspected he had spent months copying sealed files slated for permanent deletion. Now, his former supervisors told the press that Keene was mentally unstable and prone to extremist theories. They failed to mention that those same theories had nearly sparked internal inquiries years earlier, until senior officials quietly buried them. In a quiet suburban neighborhood outside the capital, a black SUV pulled into a modest driveway. 4 men in plain suits stepped out. They belonged to a specialized domestic counterintelligence unit, unofficially tied to a covert organization known only in whispers as the Black Archive. Their mission? Containment, not by law, but by necessity. They forced a former colleague of Keene's, a middle-aged data engineer, to unlock his computer. They combed through messages, confiscated anything referencing Thomas, Blackdust, or the leaked files. The same scenes played out at other homes of ex-FBI staff, all without warrants. The watchers answered to no court, only to a deeper chain of command buried beneath layers of national security. At the center of this shadow network was Director Eldridge Shaw, head of a consolidated intelligence agency formed in the wake of the attacks. Shaw remembered that morning clearly. The fire, the chaos, the fear. It had given birth to the Patriot Act, to sweeping surveillance powers. He had risen quickly, aligning with powerful defense contractors and promoting the machinery of control. Now, the leak threatened the very architecture he had helped build. Reeve or Keene, whatever his name is, he must be found, Shaw told subordinates flatly. We cannot let a fantasy unravel 20 years of progress. Keene remained on the move, lingering on the fringes of rural America. He recognized highway checkpoints, automated license plate scanners. He switched vehicles, used forged identification, avoided city centers. He paid in cash, lived on snack bars, and changed motels frequently, always checking for black SUVs lurking outside. The pressure gnawed at his nerves. Sleep came fitfully. Any night might bring a raid. Then, a message arrived from Sarah Voss, the investigative journalist. "We need to meet. I can help verify the files. People still trust me, at least in alternative media. The window is closing." Keene hesitated. Meeting in person was a risk, but without verification the documents would linger in conspiracy limbo, easy to discredit. They arranged to meet at a small coastal town's library after hours. As Keene neared the building, he spotted an unmarked sedan idling in the parking lot. A test? He circled the block. The sedan remained motionless. Maybe nothing. Maybe not. He entered. Sarah Voss, tall, sharp-eyed, in a worn leather jacket, recognized him from grainy news photos. They sat tucked away among dusty shelves. She reached out a hand. Her voice was low, calm. "Thomas, I believe you. The official story has always had holes. Let's finish this. Let's break it wide open. Keene exhaled. He slid a small USB drive across the table. This one's more complete, he said. It has the direct memos about the stand-down orders, defense contractor deals, flight path manipulations, even emails referring to the hijackers as assets gone rogue. He paused, voice catching. They used that day for endless war. They let it happen, or worse. Sarah opened the files. Her eyes widened at the bank account codes and veiled references to Operation Silence. "This is explosive," she whispered. "But we need scale. If we post this on my blog, they'll block it, smear it, shut us down. We need either a mainstream journalist with integrity or a live event too visible to censor." Just then, a noise near the entrance startled them. A figure in dark clothing peered through the glass. Keene froze. Sarah quickly shut her laptop. They ducked behind the shelves as footsteps approached, but it was only the old caretaker, cheerfully oblivious. The figure outside retreated. Maybe a false alarm. Maybe a watcher confirming the location. They left separately, agreeing to meet again in 2 days near a major city. The next step: infiltrate a news station that still allowed live broadcast without full delay. It was a long shot, but it might be their only one. That night, Keene received a message from an old contact, a systems engineer who had once helped him interpret air traffic anomalies. "One of our guys is dead, boat accident. They're picking us off." The message cut out. Keene shivered. The purge had begun. Watchers were eliminating secondary sources. Time was slipping through their fingers. On the streets, protests erupted, small but impassioned. Some called for truth. Others decried the leaks as disrespectful to the dead. The government struck back with rhetoric. Director Shaw delivered a chilling address. "Domestic agitators spreading baseless conspiracies will be brought to justice. We will not allow misinformation to fracture this nation." Sarah, meanwhile, uncovered a deeper thread in the documents, coded references to something called the Saturn Files, an intelligence ledger tracking post-attack financial flows. It outlined how official budgets had been funneled into clandestine hands. If the ledger was real, it could reveal the money trail behind the war industry's sudden boom. That ledger, Sarah realized, might be the final nail in the coffin of the official story. But time was running out. The manhunt consumed the nation. Helicopters patrolled major highways. Roadblocks sprung up overnight. Vehicles were searched at random. Civilian unease spread like static through the air. The government's desperation, Keene realized, betrayed its greatest fear, that the leak might be real. He moved from motel to motel, slipping into new disguises like a ghost trading skins. But he knew the reprieve couldn't last forever. Sooner or later, his luck would fracture. Or he'd be forced into a direct confrontation, gambling on public outrage to keep him alive. What he didn't know was that the Watchers were preparing to escalate. A black operations team had been activated. Their goal was simple: stop the Saturn files from surfacing. If Keene failed to release the evidence, the illusion would hold. But if he succeeded, if the documents made it into the light, the scaffolding of the post-9/11 world might collapse entirely. Over the following week, Thomas Keene evaded surveillance by day and collaborated with Sarah Voss by night. Each meeting grew more urgent. Among decrypted CIA fragments, they uncovered repeated references to the Saturn files, an encrypted archive allegedly created in the weeks following the catastrophe. It traced billions in emergency defense authorizations as they funneled into private hands. Oil conglomerates, weapons manufacturers, political campaigns. If the files were authentic, they would expose the true motive behind the orchestrated attack: indefinite war and limitless profit. They met in a safe house borrowed from one of Sarah's old contacts, a cramped hideout lit only by an old lamp and guarded by silence. Amid stacks of digital debris, they found a clue, an address, a decommissioned NSA installation in the southwestern desert, long thought abandoned. "We find that archive," Sarah said quietly. "We can copy the Saturn files in raw form. That's our proof. That's the endgame." Keene nodded, though dread coiled in his chest. Between them, they had a single dented car, a few thousand in cash, and some aging laptops. The Watchers had access to satellites, drones, facial recognition, every highway camera in the country. But the Watchers didn't expect an assault on a facility they considered irrelevant. Maybe, just maybe, the element of surprise still worked in their favor. Director Shaw, meanwhile, intensified the clampdown. The official story was now gospel. A rogue ex-FBI analyst had released doctored files provided by hostile foreign actors. Many believed it, but a growing minority didn't. The death toll among whistleblowers raised too many eyebrows. "If it's all fake," one protester asked on a live stream, "why are they killing everyone who might verify it?" In one incident, a known data archivist was shot in his home. The press called it a robbery. Few mentioned that the man had posted analysis of black dust only days before. Protests flared in city centers. Handmade signs read, "We deserve the truth." "Stop killing our whistleblowers." The Watchers responded with crackdowns. Arrests mounted. Dissent was rebranded as domestic terrorism. Keene kept moving. If the Saturn files were real, they could expose a financial artery connecting defense contractors to officials who pushed through massive war budgets under the guise of security. That kind of evidence could collapse the entire post-attack structure. "No wonder they're willing to kill for it," Sarah muttered. They secured new fake IDs and traveled by back roads, avoiding all major highways. Each motel was used for a single night. They paid only in cash. Billboards displaying Keene's face dotted rural interstates. Civilians were promised rewards for information. The country was turning into a low-boil police state. Then it happened. On a lonely stretch of road, a black SUV emerged in the rearview mirror. Sarah knew the pattern. She turned sharply down a dirt path, tires spitting dust into the fields. The Watchers followed. Gunfire erupted. A bullet shredded one of their tires. Their car crashed into a ditch. Dazed, they scrambled into a nearby cornfield. The Watchers pursued on foot, but soon pulled back, likely unwilling to risk a public confrontation in open daylight. Shaken, they pressed on. Eventually, they reached the outskirts of the old NSA site. A rusted perimeter fence barely held together. Warning signs hung crooked, their lettering worn away by sun and time. The cracked asphalt was overtaken by weeds. It looked like no one had been there in over a decade. The perfect place to bury something. A section of the fence had already been cut by looters. They slipped inside. The main building stood in silhouette, windows boarded, its concrete husk flanked by silence. Somewhere nearby, a lone coyote howled. Wind howled through broken vents. Inside, the air smelled of static and rot. Old cubicles sat in collapse. Dust coated everything. They swept the beams of their flashlights across crumbling walls until they found a stairwell leading underground. There, in a sub-basement, stood a bank of rusted server racks, some still faintly humming. "There's power," Keene whispered. "That's not good." It meant the site wasn't entirely dead. Someone, likely the Watchers, was still pulling data from here. At the far end, a locked vault door read, "Archive 6, Server Vault." Using a code fragment pulled from the Saturn references, Sarah's phone ran an override sequence. The lock clicked. A green light blinked. The door creaked open. Inside, they found it. Racks of aging hard drives, reels, and dusty servers. One bore the label Saturn FSV. They connected a terminal and powered it on. The screen flickered to life. Restricted, Saturn 123, enter pass. They tried keywords from the memos. On the third attempt, the screen blinked. Access granted, files poured forth. Data logs, transfer authorizations, construction contracts, insider trades, all dated within hours of the attacks. It was all there, the money trail, the motives, the machinery of war wrapped in patriotism and fear. One file stood out, referring to the hijackers as assets gone rogue. Another documented the reallocation of billions to weapons firms, the passage of surveillance legislation drafted weeks before the catastrophe. They engineered it, Sarah breathed. They fed the fear machine. They built an empire on the ashes. Upstairs, footsteps, flashlights. The watchers had arrived. They must have detected the power usage, Keene said. He launched the transfer. Drives word. Files zipped into external backups. Sarah killed the lights and ducked behind the racks, pistol drawn. The basement shuddered as flashbangs exploded in the hall. Gunfire. Bullets sliced into the metal casings. Keene initiated a satellite uplink using a portable router. Upload progress. 10%. Then a voice echoed from the stairwell. Director Shaw. Stop. You have no idea what you're unleashing, Keene. The stability of entire alliances depends on forgetting that day. The gunfight resumed. Sarah took a grazing shot to the shoulder but held her position. Shaw ordered a flashbang thrown. The room convulsed in deafening white noise. Keene was tackled. His laptop kicked. The screen cracked. The upload froze at 80%. Pinned, Keene twisted free, smashing the laptop into an attacker's face. Sparks flew. Ironically, the jolt reawakened the device. Upload resumed. Steam hissed. A bullet had ruptured a coolant line. The system groaned. Fire flickered in the walls. Shaw advanced, weapon drawn. You can die with your delusions, he snarled, or disappear, but this truth will never see daylight. Then the coolant line exploded. The facility erupted in chaos. The upload bar reached 98%. Keene, bloodied and cornered, roared in defiance and struck the final key. Upload complete. The system chimed its confirmation. The watchers, seeing the success too late, surged forward in fury. One raised a weapon. A final gunshot cracked through the server room. Darkness collapsed over him. They tore the cables free, but it no longer mattered. The Saturn files had been transmitted irreversibly. The data reached a hidden node on the open web. Moments later, smoke alarms screeched through the crumbling vault. A chain of electrical failures triggered a system-wide meltdown. Fire rippled across the basement. Sarah was thrown back by the concussive wave of a rupturing coolant pipe. Watchers retreated, dragging one of their wounded as flames consumed the archive. The concrete ceiling gave way. They presumed Thomas Keene dead, buried beneath dust and steel, but they had already lost the greater war. Within hours, the Saturn files flooded the internet. Anonymous activists, data archivists, rogue journalists, everyone with a conscience or a connection, began mirroring the files. Official attempts at suppression failed. Social media lit up, hashtags multiplying like sparks in a dry forest. The documents were damning. Projects codenamed Operation White and Project Switchboard laid bare the depths of collusion. Insider coordination with extremist groups, strategic planning for public trauma, deliberate use of civilian casualties to justify endless war. Internal memos revealed government officials coldly debating acceptable death counts for maximum geopolitical leverage. The world reacted with fury. Allied nations demanded emergency briefings from Washington. Some called for a United Nations inquiry. Rival states demanded sanctions. Across Europe and Asia, parliamentary committees launched independent investigations. Even former coalition partners began withdrawing troops from contested regions. In America, the backlash struck like lightning. Massive protests erupted. Federal buildings were surrounded by furious crowds demanding accountability. Families of the fallen held up blown-up images of the documents, weeping, shouting, "We were lied to." Corporate board members from the defense sector faced lawsuits. Stocks plummeted. Entire boards resigned or fled. Retired generals stammered through interviews, disclaiming involvement. Some offered partial confessions that only fueled the outrage. Director Eldridge Shaw attempted a press conference to quell the storm, but the crowd roared him down in righteous fury. He called for martial law, ironically igniting deeper unrest. Some states refused compliance. The Union wavered. A full political unraveling began. Investigations launched in every direction. Newly emboldened lawmakers dragged former officials, CEOs, and military leaders into hearings. Some pled the Fifth. Some invoked national security. A few cracked sobbing before the cameras. The indictments that followed didn't catch them all. The system was too vast, too self-insulated. But symbolically, everything had changed. Never again would an official version be accepted without scrutiny. Sarah Voss, battered but alive, emerged from the ruins. She wrote a now legendary column titled "One Man's Last Keystroke," describing how, amid gunfire and collapse, Thomas Keane had finalized the upload that changed the world. Her words reshaped the public's image of him, from fugitive to martyr. The truth had not only been leaked, it had been earned. Within months, memorials were erected. Near Ground Zero, a new statue was unveiled. It depicted a single figure reaching for a keyboard, head bowed, not in fear, but in solemn duty. The inscription read, "They took truth from us in the shadows. He brought it back into the light." People wept at its base, left flowers, lit candles. Whispers filled the air. His name was Thomas Keane. Old investigative commissions were torn apart. Sealed evidence reopened. Original 9/11 investigators admitted under oath that they had been misled. Some even threatened. The emotional aftershock was immense. For many, it was as if the towers had fallen all over again, only this time from within. The nation wrestled with a difficult reckoning. How fear had been weaponized, and how good people had become agents of silence. The term false skies entered common use, symbolizing the grand illusion cast over a grieving country. 6 months after the leak, a Senate inquiry began. Televised sessions brought a parade of ex-generals, ex-CEOs, and former senior officials to testify. Some confessed, others evaded. The spectacle pulled in millions of viewers nightly. Justice was imperfect, but truth was undeniable. Sarah launched her own independent news platform, False Skies Inquiry. No longer blacklisted, she broadcast daily updates, aired interviews with whistleblowers, and received an outpouring of stories from those who had long suspected the deception but had lacked the evidence or courage to speak. 1 year after the Saturn files surfaced, the shape of global power had shifted. Yet, even as the official story unraveled, a new myth was born. In a coastal town, far from the reach of media or federal men, a fisherman claimed he'd seen a man who resembled Thomas Keane. Older now, face weathered by sun and salt, eyes heavy with memory. The man had spoken quietly of his past, said he had once worked for the government, but no more. He spoke of illusions and the cost of unveiling them. Then, with the sunrise, he vanished. leaving behind only a battered flash drive and a single word etched into a torn scrap of paper. Remember, his fate remains unknown, but his legacy is immortal. Public trust in powerful institutions remains fractured. Some cling to the old lies. Others embrace a cautious hope that in truth, even the most terrifying, there is a path forward. On the darker corners of the web, conspiracy watchers still whisper that the watchers themselves were never dismantled, only retreated, waiting to cast new illusions. But for now, the greatest deception of modern history has been brought into the light. The name Black Dust remains etched in memory, a reminder that fear built the false skies. But one day, fear lost. And when it did, the truth took flight, and nothing was ever the same again.